"We don't drive soaking wet, smelly old soldiers," the driver shouted, window already rolling up. The elderly man stood motionless by the roadside, rain pelting his foggy glasses, his weathered face revealing nothing. No one stopped. No one opened their door. And only later that night, when a military helicopter was forced to make an emergency landing in the storm, did everything become clear. What do you think about this treatment? If you find it unjust, type 1 to speak up for those who once wore the uniform. Thomas Mitchell hunched his shoulders against the driving rain, his 77-year-old frame more vulnerable to the cold than he cared to admit. The veteran of Desert Storm pulled his worn jacket tighter, its military patches faded but still visible under the harsh glare of streetlights. He'd received the call an hour earlier. His son David had been in a car accident. "Stable but serious," the nurse had said. The hospital was 15 miles away, and Thomas's ancient truck had finally surrendered to age and rust last month. Tonight, of all nights, the buses weren't running due to flash flood warnings. Standing at the edge of Main Street, Thomas raised his hand as headlights approached, water streaming down his sleeve. The Uber slowed, then stopped. Hope flickered. "Need a ride, sir?" the young driver called through a partially lowered window. "Yes, please." "County General Hospital," Thomas replied, already reaching for the door handle. The driver's expression changed as he took in Thomas's drenched appearance. "Whoa, hold up. You're completely soaked. I can't let you in like that. This is premium upholstery." "I understand," Thomas said quietly, "but my son was in an accident. I need to get to the hospital." "Sorry, man, I'm not running emergency services. Try calling an ambulance." The window rolled up, and the car pulled away, spraying water across Thomas's pants. A taxi approached minutes later, its yellow roof light a beacon in the storm. Thomas waved desperately, and to his relief it stopped. The driver rolled down his window just enough to speak. "Where to?" "County General. My son's been hurt." Thomas fumbled in his wallet, extracting his old military ID for identification. "I can pay up front if—" The driver's eyes narrowed at the sight of the worn card. "Listen, old-timer, I'm about to end my shift. Hospital's too far out of my way." "Please," Thomas said. "I served in—" Yeah, everyone serves somewhere." The window went up, and the taxi accelerated away. Rain intensified, driven horizontal by gusting wind. Cars continued to pass, their drivers staring straight ahead, pretending not to see the elderly man whose clothes now clung to his thin frame. Thomas tucked his wallet, containing his military ID and a now sodden photograph of his son in uniform, back into his inner pocket, close to his heart. He began walking. The hospital was 15 miles, and he was already exhausted, but he'd march farther in worse conditions. "One foot in front of the other, soldier," he muttered to himself, a mantra from decades ago. One foot in front of the other. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder so loud it seemed to shake the very pavement. Still, Thomas walked. For his son, he would walk through hell itself. From the warmth of the Midnight Brew Cafe, a group of college students watched the elderly man trudge past the window. One nudged his friend, gesturing with his coffee cup. "Check out Grandpa Rambo trying to hitchhike in this weather," he snickered. "Probably thinks someone's gonna stop because of that ancient military jacket." His companion laughed. "Yeah, my dad says these old vets think the world owes them something forever just 'cause they played soldier for a few years." None of them moved to help. The barista, eager to close early due to the storm, was already stacking chairs on tables. When Thomas approached the door, seeking momentary shelter, she quickly flipped the sign to closed and locked it, mouthing sorry with an expression that conveyed anything but remorse. Thomas found partial cover under the awning of a shuttered grocery store. His fingers, stiff with cold in the early stages of arthritis, fumbled with his wallet again. Inside was his military ID, not just any ID, but one bearing a special seal from his unit, the 47th Combat Support Hospital. Beside it was a folded emergency evacuation map he'd always carried, a habit from his days commanding medical evacuations in hostile territory. He stared at the map, its waterproof paper still intact after all these years. In the distance, he could hear the faint thump of helicopter rotors, probably medical transport heading to the larger hospital in the next county. "Some things never leave you," The sound of chopper blades still made his heart rate spike, even decades later. Unbeknownst to Thomas, Brian Forrester was watching from his parked car across the street. An air traffic controller at the nearby Carson Military Air Base, Brian had noticed the distinctive flash of the holographic seal on Thomas's ID card when the older man checked his wallet under the streetlight. That seal was from a highly specialized unit, one that even Brian, with his security clearance, rarely encountered. He started to open his car door, intending to approach Thomas, but the older man had already continued his solitary journey, disappearing into the curtain of rain. Should I report this? Brian wondered aloud. Protocol said yes, but it seemed absurd. An elderly man in a storm was hardly a security threat. Still, rules were rules, especially regarding certain classified unit identifiers. Thomas walked on, each step more difficult than the last. His pants were soaked through, his shoes squelching with every step. Cars occasionally slowed before speeding up again, their drivers making split-second judgments about the old man in the rain. Once he'd commanded teams that saved dozens of lives under enemy fire. Once men and women had saluted him with respect. Tonight, he was invisible. I apologize, dear viewers. My voice catches as I tell this story. A man who once faced artillery fire, now unable to find shelter from the rain. Is this how we treat those who sacrificed for us? If you also find this unjust, type unfair to spread genuine respect. Near midnight, in the Carson Military Air Base Control Tower, a red notification flashed on Brian Forrester's screen. "Sir," he called to his supervisor, "we're picking up an anomalous signal near Route 16. Major Reynolds leaned over his shoulder, frowning at the display. "That's a legacy emergency protocol. Nobody's used that encryption since Desert Storm," Brian finished. "I saw something earlier. An elderly man with an ID badge bearing the 47th CSH seal." Reynolds straightened immediately. "The 47th? You're certain?" "Yes, sir. That's a level 3 security protocol. All air traffic needs to be diverted." Reynolds grabbed the radio. "Medical transport, Hilo 8. This is Carson Tower. You need to alter course and land immediately." "Carson Tower, this is Hilo 8, came the confused reply. "We're carrying time-sensitive donor organs. Request clarification." "Security override, Charlie Echo 47. Unverified military identifier in your flight path. I repeat, land immediately." Inside the helicopter, the pilot exchanged bewildered glances with his co-pilot before banking sharply. Below them, through sheets of rain, they could make out the dark ribbon of Route 16. Meanwhile, Thomas had found momentary shelter beneath a large oak tree. His strength was failing, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. The hospital still lay miles ahead. For the first time, he wondered if he would make it. Suddenly, blinding light cut through the darkness as a military Humvee's headlights illuminated the area. 4 soldiers in rain gear approached cautiously. "Sir," the lead soldier called, "we need to see some identification." Thomas wearily retrieved his wallet. "I'm just trying to reach the hospital. My son—" The soldier's flashlight beam fell on the ID card and he froze. "Lieutenant, you need to see this." The officer stepped forward, examining the card closely. His posture changed immediately. "Master Sergeant Thomas Mitchell? 47th Combat Support Hospital? Fallujah?" Thomas nodded, confused by the sudden deference. "Sir, I'm Lieutenant Parker. The officer's voice caught. "Sir, my father was in the 3rd Infantry. Fallujah, 2004. He told me about the night a medical evacuation team ran through active fire to reach wounded soldiers. You led that team." From behind the lieutenant, a young corporal stepped forward. "My dad was one of those soldiers, sir. He said you carried him a quarter mile after the stretcher took a hit." Without another word, they guided Thomas to the Humvee, radioing ahead. "Package secure. Identity confirmed. It's him. It's actually him." The storm still raged as they approached the airbase. Through the rain-streaked windows, Thomas could see a helicopter on the landing pad, its rotors still spinning. Medical staff stood nearby, looking concerned and confused about their unexpected detour. As the Humvee stopped, Major Reynolds himself opened the door, rendering a sharp salute. "Master Sergeant Mitchell, we apologize for the delay in recognizing you, sir. The hospital has been notified about your son. Our helicopter was already transporting emergency medical supplies there. Thomas found himself being led across the tarmac, soldiers holding jackets over his head to shield him from the rain. I don't understand, he said. Brian appeared at his side. Your ID triggered our security protocols, sir. But more importantly, your unit's identifier is honored here. We know what you did, what you all did. As Thomas boarded the helicopter, the entire ground crew stood at attention, saluting despite the downpour. The local newspaper headline the next morning read, Decorated combat veteran escorted by military helicopter during severe storm. Thomas sat beside his son's hospital bed, relief washing over him as David's condition stabilized. The doctors had assured him that the prompt surgery, made possible by the organs delivered on the very helicopter Thomas had flown in on, had been successful. Outside the room, hospital staff whispered about the night's events. How military personnel had filled the corridors at 2 a.m., how a helicopter had landed despite the storm warnings. A young Army captain entered quietly, approaching Thomas with respect. The base commander sends his regards, sir, he said, presenting a challenge coin, a special token of military recognition. As he pressed it into Thomas's palm, he whispered, You are not forgotten, sir. Never will be. When Thomas finally left the hospital 3 days later, something remarkable happened. Staff members lined the hallway, standing at respectful attention as he passed. Not with the forced formality of a ceremony, but with the genuine reverence reserved for those whose sacrifice is truly understood. On his jacket, Thomas wore his military ID, now in a new protective case gifted by the airbase personnel. Once ignored in the rain, it had become a living symbol of respect that never truly dies. Some people never need to ask for help because they've already given everything. If you believe they deserve to be protected until the end, share this story. Subscribe to Iron Soul Stories, where true sacrifice is remembered, quiet heroes are honored, and dignity is never forgotten. Iron Soul Stories, because some heroes never stop serving.